It's Thursday, August 11th, and this is now on HNN.
She has been taken into custody in Hawaii. All the necessary steps are being taken as we speak for her return to Miami to be held accountable for this murder.
New details on that model that was arrested on the Big Island for a Miami murder.
New at noon, the CDC loosens COVID guidelines for social distancing, quarantine, and schools.
North Korea declares victory over COVID.
Attorney General Merrick Garland says it was his decision to approve the search at former President Trump's Florida home earlier this week. I'm Skyler Henry in Washington, detailing more from his statement and the other investigations surrounding the former president.
These stories plus an update on U.S. travel troubles. Details coming up on This Is Now. And we begin with breaking news. The CDC is loosening its COVID guidelines. Some of the key takeaways: the agency no longer recommends staying at least 6 feet away from other people to reduce the risk of exposure, a shift from guidance that had been in place since the early days of the pandemic. The CDC also dropping the guidance that Americans quarantine themselves if they come into close contact with an affected person. Now, contact tracing is now only recommended for hospitals and certain high-risk group living situations such as nursing homes. And when it comes to schools, the CDC is no longer recommending daily testing or test to stay in class guidance.
Well, we have even more news just into the HNN Digital Center. The Miami State Attorney just discussed the filing of charges against OnlyFans model Courtney Clinny, who was arrested on the Big Island for the stabbing of her boyfriend in Florida.
That's right, and we have new video released today that shows a confrontation between the couple inside an elevator at their Miami apartment back in February.
We are charging 26-year-old Courtney Taylor Clenny with 1 count of second-degree murder.
U.S. Marshals in Hawaii arrested the adult entertainer suspected of murder in Miami. A warning, this story does include some graphic images of the woman covered in blood. TMZ obtained this video showing the OnlyFans model Courtney Clinny back in April, the night she allegedly stabbed her boyfriend.
Violence brings us directly to the reason we are here today, which is the killing of Christian Ombumseli on April 3rd, 2022.
She said she acted in self-defense, but authorities arrested the 26-year-old yesterday on the Big Island, where she was reportedly in a drug rehab program.
Every act of violence in a relationship is always an act of domestic violence. Those words, domestic violence, should have a decidedly ugly feel to them. Domestic violence is something I and our entire Miami-Dade community has worked hard to end. Understand the pain and the tragedy that domestic violence has always produced. All of us in law enforcement want to express to you, as family members, our deepest sympathies for this tragic murder of your loved one.
We'll have an update on this case on later editions of HNN.
The Justice Department has asked a court to unseal the search warrant the FBI received before searching the Florida estate of former President Donald Trump. And CBS has confirmed that before the search, Trump was issued a subpoena in the spring, followed by a meeting at his estate in June, all concerning documents removed from the White House. Skyler Henry has more.
Attorney General Merrick Garland says he personally approved the decision to carry out the search warrant at the Florida home of former President Donald Trump.
The department filed the motion to make public the warrant and receipt in light of the former president's public confirmation of the search, the surrounding circumstances, and the substantial public interest in this matter.
His remarks follow days of criticism and outrage from Republicans and allies of former President Trump over the FBI search at Mar-a-Lago earlier this week. A new Morning Consult political poll shows 49% of registered voters approve of the FBI's search, while 37% say they disapprove.
Mr. Trump, can we have a word?
Meanwhile, Mr. Trump maintained his innocence Wednesday, invoking the Fifth Amendment more than 440 times during a 4-hour deposition in New York, stemming from a civil investigation into his business dealings.
Is it helpful or is it hurtful in terms of legal strategy?
It is usually used not in a civil case like this one being brought by the New York Attorney General, but in a criminal case. And in a criminal case, generally you invoke the Fifth Amendment not to testify at all.
Peter Navarro, a one-time advisor to President Trump, was in a D.C. court Thursday following a contempt of Congress charge after he refused to cooperate with the House January 6th committee investigating the attack on the U.S. Capitol. Trump's former personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, is due in front of a Georgia grand jury next week over his involvement in an alleged attempt to overturn the 2020 election. Skyler Henry, CBS News, the White House.
And we've got this important update to get to. U.S. monkeypox cases have doubled. The CDC says more than 10,000 people had the virus as of yesterday. The country had 5,000 cases less than 2 weeks ago. Right now, Wyoming is the only state that hasn't reported any cases. New York has the most, followed by California and Florida. Hawaii has 11 cases, according to the CDC. And this evening, health experts will discuss the virus in an online panel. We have a link posted to it on our H&N digital platforms. Also, wanted to let you know the State Department of Health is offering vaccines at the Blaisdell Center on Sunday.
We told you earlier about a popular vacation destination in China known as China's Hawaii and how thousands of people are stuck there because of a COVID outbreak. Selena Wang has the latest on the lockdown.
Zero COVID China, vacations can easily turn into nightmares. Starting from this weekend, some 80,000 tourists were trapped in Sanya City on Hainan Island. It's often referred to as the Hawaii of China. Now, some of these tourists are finally getting some relief. Authorities said they're starting to fly back some of the trapped tourists, but it's unclear how many are able to go home and when the rest will be able to get out. But COVID cases on Hainan Island are still increasing, with more than 570 new COVID cases reported on Wednesday. That counts as a major outbreak in China, where the country is still trying to stamp out every last case with quarantines, lockdowns, and mass testing. And it's not just Hainan that's struggling to contain new outbreaks. Tibet, which had been COVID-free for 920 days, has now reported 22 new COVID cases since Monday. In response, Tibet is rolling out mass testing. Meanwhile, China's far western region of Xinjiang reported more than 100 new COVID cases. Xinjiang's capital has locked down 6 major districts. And Xiamen City, in the southeastern province of Fujian, opposite of Taiwan, they've reported 7 new COVID cases. Residents in parts of the city are now banned from leaving their communities. The highly infectious Omicron subvariant is putting China's harsh zero COVID policy to the test. These snap lockdowns continue to put major pressure on China's economy. Still, most major cities across China also require recent COVID tests in order to enter any public places, including here in Beijing. And our lives in China are still dictated by our health codes. We have to scan a code in order to enter any public area, a health code on our phones. That allows the authorities to contact trace, but also surveil in a very detailed way where virtually all 1.4 billion people are at any one time.
We got an update on the situation developing in Taiwan in today's Pacific Rim Report.
With Rob York of the Honolulu-based Pacific Forum, China this week seemed really angry that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. I guess the average person who doesn't follow this closely could be forgiven for saying, what's the big deal?
Well, China has always viewed Taiwan as part of its territory. The general public in Taiwan disagrees with that assessment and believes that they are their own country for the most part. And there's been an increased support from U.S. figures, including in Congress, for Taiwan's position. Even if they aren't going to outright say Taiwan is independent, they are going to support its autonomy.
One of the interesting things about Taiwan is that a lot of ethnic Taiwanese have emigrated to the U.S. And another interesting thing is that they're really important in production of semiconductors. So I guess there are reasons for America want the reunification of China and Taiwan to take like forever.
Right. There is definitely an increased emphasis on semiconductor production, and Taiwan accounts for an enormous part of that process. So yes, they are very important in that regard, and the U.S. wants to support their autonomy, and not just for that reason. If there were an invasion, of course, semiconductor production would be intensely disrupted, and that would have consequences for all of us, including those of us who work from home more often these days.
Yeah, good point. Now, there were war games conducted by China during the Pelosi visit. How much was going on in the Strait of Taiwan?
Well, there were definitely exercises that were taking place, and if you look at the formations that the PLA Navy took, you could see that they were designed to at least partially encroach on the waters that Taiwan claims for itself. And you can also tell that they were designed to simulate an invasion in the sense that they surrounded and would effectively have blockaded the island if they had taken place for real.
Americans like to think of the Defense Department as something that's entirely under civilian control. It does what the White House says and no more. Is that the situation with the Chinese military, or do they have a certain amount of clout of their own in the military?
Well, the inner workings of the Chinese Communist Party are pretty opaque for the most part, so who knows exactly, but they are technically under the authority of the Chinese Communist Party. So yeah, they don't have the same kind of civilian control that we have, at least in theory.
I guess the reason was I was wondering if they might be a little more warlike than people far away in Beijing.
Well, there's definitely more of a emphasis, I'd say, in the Chinese general public towards the possibility of an attack on Taiwan. And there's been, in some cases, people in authority positions in China who have actually tried to tamp down on that and say now is not the time. Because most projections say that China's military, as threatening as they may appear, is not actually ready to carry out a kind of invasion like that.
Okay. All right, that's a little bit of background for you on something that's been going on in the past few weeks, and will continue to go on in one form or another.
North Korea is claiming it has conquered COVID as it declares victory over the virus. And it's blaming Seoul for its outbreak. Paula Hancock reports.
North Korea says it's achieved in 91 days what the rest of the world has not managed in 2.5 years, eradicating COVID-19.
The difficult war against the disease is now over, and today we are finally declaring the victory.
Maskless and shaking hands, Kim Jong-un congratulates the officials he says beat the virus. Kim says they still need to keep a steel-strong anti-epidemic barrier until the health crisis ends for the rest of the world. His sister and high official Kim Yo-jong said Kim himself had a very high fever, a statement met with visible emotion from the audience, a consistent message that the leader has been suffering alongside his people. Pyongyang officially reported 4.77 million so-called fever cases up until July 29th. Actual COVID testing is scarce, and just 74 deaths out of a population of 25 million, numbers widely questioned.
I think we need to see North Korea's COVID outbreak as not only a public health matter, but also a political matter. The beginning of the outbreak did not signal North Korea's first COVID case. And the end of the outbreak being announced does not mean that they've got rid of COVID either. It just means that this was a time when they needed to shift onto something else and to make use of the outbreak for political purposes.
Kim Yo-jong also called for deadly retaliation against South Korea, which she claims intentionally sent the virus across the DMZ via anti-North Korea propaganda balloons, saying if it happens again, the North will wipe out the South Korean authorities.
This national crisis that we suffered was clearly brought about by the hysterical farce by the enemy, using the global health pandemic to escalate the confrontation with our nation.
South Korea's unification ministry calling the accusations groundless and the comments disrespectful and threatening. This declaration of victory is being seen by some North Korean watchers as a message of hope and unity for a struggling domestic audience. It could also potentially be a message for neighbouring China that North Korea is ready to lift restrictions, to open borders, and crucially, to allow desperately needed food into the country. Paula Hancock, CNN Seoul.
NORAD says Russian military planes skirted close to the U.S. airspace at least 3 times this week. The U.S. military released this photo of the second time a Russian plane flew into the Alaska Air Defense Identification Zone on Monday. The photo shows a U.S. fighter jet flying within visual range of a Russian surveillance aircraft. F-22 fighter jets intercepted the plane, and officials say it never entered American or Canadian sovereign airspace. The Air Defense Identification Zone is the airspace around U.S. sovereign airspace. The U.S. monitors it in the interest of national security. The U.S. Transportation Secretary gave an update to CNN regarding those U.S. travel troubles and pilot shortages. Here's what he had to say.
Well, let me tell you what we saw over the weekend. There was a lot of severe weather, and that can happen, but it shouldn't have created the kind of ripple effects through the system that it did. That is something that, to me, is an indication that we still have not seen the improvements that we need, that the system is very brittle. Now, after I brought them together after the Memorial Day weekend, where we saw a very high number of cancellations, I asked them about more realistic schedules, more pilot training, because a lot of this actually comes down to staffing shortages, about customer service when something does happen. Can you get somebody on the phone? And, of course, how we can help. Anything we can do with what's under the control of the FAA, like optimizing the resources for air traffic control. But clearly, the bottom line is we're not seeing the level of performance that passengers expect. And we're expanding right now the passenger protections that my department enforces for passengers. Matter of fact, you can go on our website right now and weigh in on a set of rules. One airline expert has described it as potentially the biggest expansion of passenger rights in decades, and we'd love for passengers to share their experience and make your voice heard. The biggest element of it is the human factor, not having enough crew, especially pilots, to do the job. And airlines, of course, have an obligation to service the tickets that they sell. What we're seeing is that the hiring has come back in most areas, but they're still short on pilots.
Been following that story for weeks now and will continue to do so. All right, we have more developing news coming into the H&N Digital Center.
That's right. We have an update on that massive wildfire on the Big Island in the Waikoloa area. Now, officials just about 20 minutes ago gave us an update. They say the fire has so far burned more than 10,000 acres of land on Pohakuloa training area and state lands to the west of PTA. Containment efforts remain ongoing and the cause of the fire remains under investigation. Now, they said gusts above 30 miles per hour have pushed the flames from inside PTA onto state property and on the Kona side of Daniel Ke'inoi Highway near Pu'uanuhulu. Now, the National Weather Service has extended a red flag warning through tonight for Kohala, Kona, and Ka'u districts.
All right, let's take you live outside from our tower cam. You can see it wobbling and bouncing around a bit in those strong winds. Looking at the state capitol right now, and a good reminder that this Saturday is the primary election. So stay tuned for coverage on H&N about that. But let's keep talking about the weather and those first alerts out there right now. Here's Guy Hoggy with an update.
Because of a disturbance down to the south, it acts like a vortex. It pulls winds into it, right? So it's going to be breezy today, but that disturbance moves away. And by tomorrow, the winds will back off significantly. Even lighter winds are due in from Saturday into the week, into the early part of next week. And because of those lighter winds, humidity levels will be climbing. We'll likely get some afternoon spotty showers, but they won't be widespread. So significant weather not in the cards. We're going to see fairly calm weather, but again, it's going to get a little bit more humid from tomorrow on, and that could lead to some spotty afternoon showers. But for today, the only alert is that red flag warning, again, for all leeward areas due to the heightened brush fire threat.
Are you wondering what's going on in cyberspace and what everyone's talking about on your feeds? Well, you're about to find out. So here's what I found, and I thought it was pretty interesting. So Disney is known as the happiest place on earth, and apparently it's a pretty happy place in the world of streaming too. Disney Plus added 14.4 million subscribers during the third quarter.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot. Between all of Disney's streaming services, that's Disney Plus, of course, along with Hulu and ESPN Plus. So they own a lot, right? So that brings the grand total to 221 million total subscribers, beating out Netflix and Wall Street's expectation. Disney continues to heavily spend money on its streaming with more than $1 billion in the third quarter.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of money on streaming.
Good for them.
Yeah.
Well, Lay's is bringing back its flavor swap. Remember this? So the flavor swapped items are Lay's chips that taste like kettle cooked Fritos chili cheese, Cheetos, Doritos Cool Ranch, and Funyuns, respectively. So officials with the food company say it's a fun way for consumers to enjoy a new but familiar snacking experience. These flavor swaps are available in grocery stores while supplies last.
I love that Frito chili cheese flavor. That's one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
Little messy on your fingers, though.
Some entertainment news. Kenan Thompson, who's the longest running Saturday Night Live cast member ever. Do you know that?
I figured he's been around a long time, yeah.
Well, anyway, he's been chosen to host this year's Emmy Awards. Thompson enters his 20th season of SNL in the fall. He's well qualified to host the awards because he won an Emmy himself and has been nominated 5 other times. Now, he said being a part of this incredible evening where they honor the best of the TV community is, quote, ridiculously exciting. The Emmys air live from the Microsoft Theater in Los Angeles September 12th, right here on KHNL, and it also stream on Peacock.
Speaking of awards, H&N's digital team
Oh,
just
yeah.
found out that we won a National Murrow Award.
Huge.
Congrats to the whole team.
Yes.
So awesome.
Yes.
All right, even more good news now to get to. And, you know, when police release body camera footage, it's not always a good thing, but that was not the case in Wisconsin. There was a wild turkey chase, all caught on
boy.
camera. Here's Jeannie Mose with more on that.
You expect to see a turkey at the Thanksgiving parade or on your plate.
Yeah.
But not breaking and entering.
Somehow it got through that second story window and broke the glass.
I guess that answers the question, can turkeys fly?
Well, at least 2 stories, yeah.
With a perpetrator flapping around an unoccupied apartment in Wausau, Wisconsin, Patrol Officer Benjamin Thuman suited up.
I want the gloves and the net, though, is what I'm saying.
It's a turkey, not a tiger.
Yeah, it's gonna scratch, dude. Have you hunted turkey before?
Officer Thuman, no known relation to the company that makes deli meat, including turkey, breached the door.
I see it.
A female turkey. Now it was Officer Thuman's turn to tease.
What are you hiding over there for?
The first skirmish started in the living room.
Told you it's getting...
Then moved from the kitchen to a bedroom. This wasn't a first for Wausau police. Last year, they had to eject a deer from a nursing home. Within minutes, the officer's body cams recorded the turkey's capture.
Hey, well done.
But what to do with her? It seemed like you guys were considering tossing it out the window.
We figured it came in this way, so maybe it can come out that way.
But they decided safer to carry her out. She was released.
There you go. Well done.
Without bail. At least she didn't wind up wearing prison stripes.
It's a turkey, not a tiger.
Jeannie Mose, CNN, New York.
Hit it right in the bum.
What is up with that last shot, Jeannie Mose?
It's turkey and tiger.
Yeah, it's a turkey, not a tiger. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this Almost Friday edition.
So close.
Yeah, so close. Yep, of This Is Now. Ashley's back first at 4 on KHNL, so you won't want to miss that. Don't forget, we're podcasting here all the time at H&N. Just search Hawaii News Now wherever you get your podcast. Have a good one.
See ya.